Good morning. My name is Donna Marie Collins. I'm the hearing examiner that will be presiding over this morning's hearing. It's an application to rezone property from the agricultural and residential single-family districts to a residential plan development to allow development of up to 180 multifamily units. The details of this case will be described by applicants' representatives. I have a quick question. Do we have any members of the public here?
Yes, we do.
Yes, okay. So let me take a few minutes to explain this procedure. If you're not accustomed to these hearings, typically what happens is the property owner's representatives present the request. They may have one or more witnesses. They'll talk about a number of things, including environmental, transportation, compatibility. They'll discuss their site plan and explain how all those things are consistent with our land development regulations. Following their presentation, the county planner that reviewed the application and prepared the staff report will also make a presentation. Following their presentation, I will open up the floor to members of the public. If you wish to speak, I'll go through the sheets that you filled out here, public participation forms. I'd like you to come to the podium, state your name. If you wish, we'll put an aerial up on the wall. You can show us where you live in relationship to the project, and you can share with us your support or your concerns regarding the request. Oftentimes I find surrounding property owners are not completely opposed or totally in favor of a request. They have specific concerns. If you share them with us, you allow us the opportunity to clarify whatever the subject matter is, and if necessary, fashion a condition to address those concerns if they're not already addressed by our permitting regulations. Following public input, I will close public input. We'll come back to the parties. They will respond to any questions that were asked by members of the public at that time, and if they have any concluding remarks, they'll give those. Sometimes I leave the record open for updated plans or conditions if they came up during the hearing. Other than that, at the close of the hearing, I will prepare a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. They are the final decision makers in this case. If you wish to have the opportunity to address the Board of County Commissioners, you must speak on the record in this hearing. So I urge you, if you think you might want to do that, to come to the podium and share some thoughts with us. Typically, I issue a recommendation within a week or no more than 3 weeks. And then if you provide us with your email address, you'll be notified of the final board hearing via email by the county staff. That hearing is a little bit different than this one. In this one, when you come to the podium, you can speak as long as you like. You can ask questions. We'll make notes of them and then come back and try to answer them. At the board hearing, you will be permitted only 3 minutes to speak. So if it gets to that point and your concerns were not addressed, I urge you to organize your thoughts so that you can present them cohesively in 3 minutes. And I think that's everything. All testimony and evidence that I take in at this hearing must be accepted under oath, so I will administer the oath to everyone in the room at one time. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony and evidence you introduce into the record today will be the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. I'm ready to begin.
All right. Thank you and good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. For your record, my name is Richard Aiken. I'm an attorney with Henderson Franklin here in Fort Myers. I'm here this morning representing the applicant on case number DCI-2022-00037, which is the Bayshore 31 RPD. Just a couple housekeeping matters up front. The applicant did submit a 48-hour letter in advance of the hearing, and we submitted another one in advance of this continued hearing. We identified only one area of clarification with the staff report, and that was that deviation 3, which is the emergency access deviation. We wanted to clarify that that access will provide emergency access from State Road 78, not just from Hartwig Lane. And so that was the one clarification. I have talked to staff and Mr. Badamshin about that. Staff, my understanding, is in agreement that that is, as shown on the master concept plan, how that emergency access will work. So that was the only point of clarification. I would also note that the original hearing in this matter was continued. The reason we continued it, I just want to make it clear on the record, there were some conditions that were added by staff in their 48-hour letter, specifically one regarding compensatory storage. We just wanted to make sure that we were able to comply with that condition and that wouldn't result in any necessary changes to the master concept plan. So that was the reason to take a look at that. We did that. It did not result in any needed changes to the master concept plan. So the master concept plan that you're seeing here today and that we'll provide you is the same one that staff's already reviewed. There's nothing new about it, but we just needed to confirm that.
Okay, so do you want me to rely on the original one, or you're going to submit one today that's dated?
I'm going to submit one today that's dated. In fact, I've got that for you right now.
Okay.
So what I'd like to do now is I have a copy of the applicant's PowerPoint presentation as well as a master concept plan for you with today's date.
Thank you. That's applicant exhibit 1, PowerPoint. 2 is the updated master concept plan.
I have a large one.
Great, thank you. I'll take them both. What is today? 13th? Okay, I'm ready. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So good morning again. We have our project team here with us today. We have William Holton with Next Metro. He's the developer of the case. He does not have an affirmative presentation, but if there are any questions that he can answer, he is available here to do so. We have our land use planner today, who's Tom Tokarski. He's an AICP planner with RVI Planning. He's going to do most of the presentation today and tell you a little bit more about the project. Our civil engineer is Carl Baracco with Baracco and Associates. You'll hear from him as well. Our transportation engineer is Ted Treesh, and our environmental consultant is Bear Staskel. Each of them has a presentation here for you this morning. The request before you is to rezone the 34.8 acre parcel that's the subject of the rezoning from Ag 2 and residential single family RS1 to a residential plan development in order to allow for up to 180 multifamily residential units. So with that brief introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Tokarski to walk through the project in more detail. I would note that Mr. Tokarski, he is an AICP certified planner. He has never been accepted as an expert in front of the Lee County hearing examiner. So I'll turn it over to him to tell you a little bit more about his experience. A copy of his resume was included with our 48-hour letter, and I do have a copy for you right here if you need it as well.
Yeah, let me have that.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, Tom Tokarski.
Could you just give me an overview of your
Sure.
educational and work experience background as it relates to planning and familiarity with the Lee Plan and the Land Development Code?
Sure. So I'm a certified planner, AICP certified planner since August 2022. I have a master's in urban planning and development from Cleveland State University. I previously served as a staff planner for City of Northport and senior planner for City of Sarasota.
Slow down, please.
In Lee County, I've done approximately 5 projects, ranging from the Cowart IPD over on Old US 41 to the Babcock Ranch Lee Amendment and Comp Plan Amendment, South Seas Resort, Amazing Grace Special Exception, and 2631 First Street Rezone.
Okay, thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you. So as Mr. Akins stated, the request is to rezone the 34.8 acre subject property from agricultural 2 to residential single family 1 for a residential plan development to allow for up to 180 multifamily residential units. The project's located on Bayshore Road at 7150 Bayshore Road, south of Bayshore, approximately 1.75 miles west of I-75. And it's located within the North Fort Myers planning community, and it's located on an urban corridor. The project's also located just north of Daughtry Creek Residential Subdivision, and it's currently zoned Ag 2 and RS1 with a future land use of suburban wetlands as shown on the maps here. Ag is the green portion. The RS1 is the beige portion. Future land use, we have our suburban and our wetlands. I would also note that this project isn't on the edge of the suburban future land use. It's located more towards the core of the suburban land use, future land use. The request, as I mentioned, is for 180 multifamily units. The product character type, we'll talk about compatibility a little more in the presentation, but it's not, when you think of multifamily, it's not your typical garden style units that are 3 or 4 stories walk up. It's more cottage style in nature. It's 180 units ranging from 1 to 3 bedrooms, more rental home style on a master concept plan, 1 lot that'll be managed by 1 group, but rented by individuals. We're doing a 1-story max building height for the residential units, 35 feet max for the amenity center. You'll see in the background in this picture, there's the amenity building or recreation office building there. That's the only building that would exceed the 1-story at 35 feet. And we're also asking for the associated infrastructure and residential amenities. Shown here is the master concept plan that we've presented, and the most that you have updated there. Main entrance off of Bayshore Road. Secondary access, as we discussed, this would be emergency access only connecting to Bayshore Road, also connecting to Hartwig Lane. This would be emergency access only, and this emergency access would also improve access for the residents on Hartwig, allowing, if this access is blocked up here, allowing secondary access to Bayshore. So it would serve as emergency access for our community that we're proposing, as well as the existing. We are proposing parking along the middle of the site with the residential cottages abutting the single family, and that's purposely done also to help compatibility, so the parking isn't adjacent to existing uses. Our preserve areas on the southwest will remain untouched. Amenities we'll discuss further in the compatibility section, would be more towards Bayshore 31. For the open space, we're required to have 40% open space, and we're proposing 40%, and then indigenous space would be 50% of the open space, which is approximately 6.96 acres. Some questions that came up in our community meetings was in regards to the Sandville Cemetery, which is located where the star is on our property. This is actually located within the FPL easement up here and will remain untouched. It's outside of the proposed access and will not be touched at all. As I mentioned, for the compatibility, we match the character of the surrounding properties, looking out from existing homes. It'll be similar 1-story, single-family appearing structures. With the buffers, we have our Type B buffer to the south and east, a preserve to the southwest, a Type A separating the development and the DOT pond, and a Type D along the right-of-way. And as I mentioned, the amenities are focused along the entrance up in here, which will help keep the amenities and any of the higher structures away from the existing residential. Also help cut down on noise, as sometimes comes with amenities. And then, emergency access, as I mentioned, is proposed on the north along Bayshore and will connect to the existing community. For our deviations, I apologize for some of it cutting out there. Our deviation 1 is shown by the orange circles, is to request for a hammerhead design on dead-end streets exceeding 150 feet in length, and we're doing this. The dead-end streets will be limited to a maximum of 150 feet in length, prohibiting fire hydrants on the dead ends as well. And the request received a no objection from the North Fort Myers Fire District, Lee County Sheriff's Office, and Lee County EMS. Staff had no objection to the proposed deviation. Deviation 2, also shown by the orange circle, is a request to allow a 30-foot excavation setback from the property boundary where a 50-foot setback is required. The justification for this is an existing FDOT detention area surrounded by the chain link fence. The deviation allows the perimeter, the minimum necessary for buffering to make that area work, and for better stormwater management, we're requesting the deviation. Staff also approved of deviation 2 subject to an enhanced type A landscape buffer abutting the FDOT detention pond, which we're in agreement with. Deviation 3 is a request to allow one primary access on Bayshore Road and an emergency stabilized access on Hartwig Lane, also connected to Bayshore Road. We discussed this. This would be emergency only main access at the entrance here. Justification for this one: the property abuts 920 feet approximately of Bayshore Road frontage, which has a minimum intersection separation of 660 feet. The closest intersection south, which is the Williams Road Shawn Lane, which is more, let's see if we can get it on the aerial here. I don't know if we have it. Oh, yep, right here. This is the closest intersection to the south.
So is it customary not to reflect the deviation number for a deviation of this type on the site plan?
We have the deviation number, I believe, right.
Oh, there it is,
Yep.
3, okay.
Yep.
I missed it.
It's hidden there, and yeah, I apologize. There's a lot on there. It's impossible to meet the intersection separation criteria with Bayshore Road access points. The requested deviation has received no objection from North Fort Myers Fire District, Lee County Sheriff's Office, and Lee County EMS, and staff had no objection to deviation 3.
So has FDOT approved the access drive?
FDOT would be, that would be handled at the permitting stage.
It seems like your choices are so limited, that would be something you'd need to know on the front end.
I can ask Mr. Shreesh to speak to that more.
Okay, he can discuss it during his transportation testimony.
Deviation number 4 is a request to allow the existing FDOT drainage easement to encroach within the 50-foot natural waterway buffer, and that is shown by the orange circle here. Justification is the proposed deviation only applies to lands within the FDOT drainage easement. The plantable width for this buffer varies from 17 feet to 26 feet. While the creek undulates, the easement doesn't, so the easement's stagnant where the creek shifts through that. Approval of this deviation will benefit the project by preventing future non-compliance should the vegetation be removed by FDOT. That's out of the applicant's control if FDOT removes that vegetation. So no detriment to public health, safety, welfare will occur of this. Staff was also in agreement with this deviation, citing also that the conditions outside of the property owner's control, and they were in support of deviation 4. The final deviation is a request to allow less than 1/2 the natural waterway buffer to be planted instead of the required half width. This also has to deal with the preserve area on site, which is an existing condition. Justification: the deviation applies only to the land within the FDOT drainage easement where the drainage easement overlaps the 50-foot natural waterway buffer by more than 25 feet. The applicant's not proposing to remove the indigenous vegetation in this area, but has no control over the FDOT future maintenance of the creek. Approval of the deviation prevents future non-compliance should the FDOT remove the vegetation, and again, staff was in support of this condition. Utilities and stormwater.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, my name is Carl Baracco. I'm with Baracco & Associates, a professional engineer. I have been accepted as an expert in this venue in civil engineering in the past, and I ask for that privilege again this morning.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. This morning, I'm going to review the utilities and stormwater management. It's really very straightforward. Potable water will be provided by Lee County Utilities. Sanitary sewer service will be provided by FGUA, and both letters of availability are on file. The stormwater management system will be designed in accordance with the South Florida Water Management District Handbook. That will consider wetlands, water quality, attenuation of stormwater runoff, and compensating storage. These considerations will require all rainfall on-site to be managed on-site before discharge through a control structure with controlled discharge to the east branch of Daughtry's Creek. That will ensure that there are no external impacts due to stormwater. That's all I have this morning. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you.
Next section, if we could have Mr. Sedgwick come up for environmental. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam. Barrett Stacy with Bear Paws Environmental. I've previously been tendered as an expert witness in wetlands and wildlife ecology.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. All right, I did a species survey and assessment on the property. There were no protected species identified. We did have almost 6.5 acres of wetlands. Of those 6.5, 4.38 are going to be disturbed, or 4.38 are going to be preserved. The impacts are to the lower quality wetlands on site. We have 1.30 acres of other surface water, which encompasses Daughters Creek that runs through. There will be that 50-foot waterway, as previously discussed, along Daughters Creek, and we will receive an ERP permit from the Water Management District.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Driscoll, I had just one
Yes, sir.
question for you, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, sir.
So I know we got some questions during some of the public informational meetings that we had about the protected species and whether they were on site. Could you just give us a real brief explanation as to what you do to look for that and how you come to that conclusion?
We do tight transects, minimal transect requirements to the county through all and any vegetated communities on site. And we checked everything. We checked for gopher tortoise, burrowing owls, bald eagles, fox squirrels, anything that's protected within the county is what we go out and survey for, and we did not see anything on there when we were on site.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
And will you have to go back prior to the development order permitting stage?
More than likely, they'll require another updated survey when we get to that point.
And if something is discovered then the
we-
management plan would have,
If there was a gopher tortoise or fox squirrel, we'd have to abide by all the rules and regulations through the state.
okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Up next, if we could have Mr. Treach with Transportation come and speak on transportation for the site.
Ted Treach with TR Transportation Consultants. I have been accepted as an expert in transportation planning and asked to be such accepted this morning.
Yes, please proceed.
Just a quick summary of our analysis. There's also a staff summary in the staff report, which we're in agreement with. The analysis shows that there's adequate capacity on Bayshore Road. Our access onto State Route 78 is controlled by the state. That's why we had to ask for the deviation, because the state limits access spacing pursuant to their access management standards. So due to the limited frontage this property had, we were only permitted one access on this property along our frontage. So this access will be limited to a directional median opening that we've already met with DOT in a preliminary fashion. So the next step will be a full permitting process through the state once we get to the development order stage for the access permitting. So the turn lanes will be part of the FDOT process at development order stage. So, but there is adequate level service on the surrounding and adjacent roads. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Well, I just wanted to confirm that FDOT is approving your access at that location because you don't really have a lot of flexibility there.
Yes. Yes, we did ask for an access within the utility easement further to the north, but they did not approve of that. That's why they will approve the emergency access only, but they won't approve an access that's available to the residents.
All right, thank you for clarifying that.
All right, with the consistency with the Lee County Comprehensive Plan, staff finds the request is consistent with the Lee Plan's policies, goals, objectives, and standards. I'm not going to go through them all, but just some of the ones to point out. Policy 1.1.5, suburban future land use category. The residential plan development proposes 180 dwelling units at 5.2 dwelling units per acre, where 6 dwelling units is permitted. And again, this is we believe that this product really is compatible with the surrounding land use because of its character, and the buffers and amenity center being directed more towards Bayshore Road. Policy 1.5.1, permitted land uses in wetlands consist of very low density residential uses. The majority of the wetlands on site are preserved. Where impacts do occur, the proposed density calculation reflects a density of 1 dwelling unit per 20 acres. Objective 2.1.4, development location. The development program proposes an infill multi-family community with clustered buildings to preserve existing wetlands and native vegetation. Infill will reduce sprawl by minimizing the need to extend urban services. This is an area that is slated for development rather than pushing development further out east and having to extend services and create more traffic and congestion going out east. This is an area that can handle the development with existing utilities. And as I mentioned before, rather than having a 3-4 story garden style apartment, we think that the product with the clustered single story fits more with the character of the existing neighborhood. Policy 5.1.5 protected existing and future residential areas from any encroachment of uses that are potentially destructive to the character and integrity of the residential environment. The proposed development is similar in character, as I mentioned, to the form of the surrounding community. All required buffers are provided and traffic is directed to the arterial roads rather than internal. Even the emergency exit will be emergency only going to Bayshore Road to help keep that traffic off of neighborhood local roadways. And as I mentioned, the amenities are planned to be pushed away from the existing residential towards Bayshore Road. And then other notable policies, 2.2.1 has to do with capacity of existing infrastructure, which there is existing capacity. Policy 4.1.1 has to do with connection to water and sewer, which we will be achieving. And policy 124.1.1 is preserving wetlands, which we'll be doing to the extent possible. As Mr. Stechel explained, the wetlands that are being impacted are lower quality wetlands. Decision-making criteria, staff finds that the request complies with LDC 34-145 4A 1B and A2. I won't go through all of them, but we are in compliance and agree with staff on the staff report. In community outreach, we actually held 2 community outreaches meetings at the North Fort Myers Recreation Center, one on November 27th, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. We actually provided additional mail notices rather than just those within the distance requirement. We reached out to everyone within the Dotcher Creek community so that they would all be aware, since they will all be having to drive past this or notice this development in their area and be impacted by it in some form. And then again, we held another meeting in the Fort Myers Planning Panel area, again at North Fort Myers Recreation Center on February 6th, 2024 at 6 p.m. In conclusion, we accept staff recommendation, the conditions in the staff report. The applicant is in agreement with the conditions. We request support of, or I'm sorry, the request supports the goals, objectives, and policies of the Lee County Comprehensive Plan. And we are consistent with the LDC and compatible with the surrounding land uses, and we do request a recommendation of approval for the proposed residential plan development. And we'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. I don't have questions at this time.
Thank you.
Is there any further testimony from the applicant?
No, Madam Hearing Examiner, that concludes our presentation. We would request the opportunity to respond to any questions or comments raised by the public, should there be any.
I have this additional page attached to my, is that an error?
It was added to the back of the PowerPoint in case a
Yeah.
question came up, but you can take that off since we didn't go through it.
Okay. Thank you. Sharon?
Yes. Just trying to get to an aerial. Maybe that's fine. Good morning, Sharon Badamchian from the County Zoning. My resume is on file. I was recognized as expert in zoning and planning. I would like to be recognized at this time. Okay.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. Well, as you heard, they are requesting to rezone from agricultural and residential single-family to planned development for multifamily use. The project they are proposing, it's something that we start having this type of project in the past couple of years. They basically propose single-family type structures, but within the multifamily setting. And we reviewed these projects as multifamily when it comes to development orders, but for building permit purposes, they are considered single family. I just want to let them know that we had some issues in the past with this. They are, the density they are proposing is within the range, and we had this, what's called it, 48-hour notice, sorry, I forgot. 48-hour notice sent on March 26, which we added few conditions and few additional analysis because part of the project is within the coastal high hazard area. And we reviewed this project and we are recommending approval. They are proposing 5 deviations, which are mostly because of the site. One of the conditions about the emergency access, as you can see in our staff report, we are saying it will hook up to Hartwig Lane. We are not mentioning Bayshore. The reason for it is we are not sure if they will be able to have permission from the FDOT to have access to Bayshore for an emergency. It's just an emergency entrance, hopefully will never be used, but we need this because of the project is more than 5 acres. And if they can have access to both sides is even better. People living on Hartwig Lane can have additional access in case something happened on the road, but it's just an emergency access. Besides that, they have utilities, as you heard, available to them. And staff reviewed, they're in full compliance with all LEAP plan and land development code regulations. Staff recommends approval subject to all staff conditions, including the ones included in our 48-hour notice.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question of the applicant regarding the emergency access. Is this going to be gated? How are you going to keep people using it as a cut through?
Correct, to answer your question again for the record, Tom Sikarsky, the intent is to gate it and also have a gate along Hartwig Lane to keep people from cutting through this way through the development. So through emergency, the first intent, if you're in the development, would be to utilize Bayshore, and Hartwig Lane would only be opened if these residents in Hartwig have to exit through there, but it would be gated.
And then how will this gate be opened if the folks on Hartwood Lane want to use the access?
To clarify, I believe it'd be through a Knox box, typical for opening through an emergency situation.
So you're going to provide a code of some kind to the neighborhood? Or would emergency response personnel have to be involved before that access was opened?
For the record again, Richard Aiken. So yes, emergency personnel would have to be involved. There would have to be an emergency that would be, and it specifically is for use by emergency services, so an ambulance, something of that nature in the event that there's a block at the other intersection, the main exit or entrance. So emergency services would have to be involved in order to open the gates. It wouldn't be something that someone could just decide they wanted to use because they were late for work or something like that. Only in a state of emergency where emergency services were involved. And when I say state of emergency, I don't necessarily mean something that was declared a state of emergency, but something where emergency services was involved to open the access. It wouldn't be something that would be a secondary point of ingress and egress during otherwise normal hours.
All right, so when it is described as a stabilized access, does that mean it's going to be like raised up and stabilized, or is it going to be low-lying? What does this improvement look like?
It would have to be stabilized so to ensure that if the emergency was some sort of flooding issue or anything like that, it wouldn't be flooded, but also that it could support an emergency vehicle if need be.
All right, thank you. Anything further from staff or the applicant? All right, I'm going to open up podium to members of the public. I'm going to call the names one by one. Just because you filled this out doesn't mean you have to speak, but I remind you, you need to speak today if you'd like an opportunity to speak to the elected officials. Miles Eckert. Good morning. Thank you for coming, sir.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. Thank you. My name is Miles Eckert, and I am a resident in the Daughtry's Creek subdivision that will be directly located directly adjacent to the planned development. I can show you where we live.
Sure, please do.
Our house is located right here, 7484 Dana Lynn Circle. So we are right up against the planned development. My qualifications are I have a Bachelor of Science in Biology, and I'm also an environmental consultant with a background with industrial hygiene and PRP with FDP petroleum work. My neighbors, some of the qualifications they have are professional engineers. They work for Lee DOT, licensed contractors, and Charlie Krebs is also in our neighborhood, who was formerly on the North Fort Myers Planning Board, and to my best of my knowledge has expressed concerns for this project. Some of the concerns that we have that I'd like to go through is, for one, it seemed like there was no notification that was given for the continued hearing. I know that there was a previous notification given in March for the other hearing, and I believe was stated 11/27/23 and 2/6/24 that went out. But there was no indication that this was happening today, which is why there's only one other person here with me and no other representatives from the neighborhood. I believe there might be an affidavit process that I can speak on someone's behalf, and I would like to exercise that right to speak on the behalf of my cohorts and neighbors that were unable to attend. There's Jeff Wasco, who is a PE, who has been accepted by this forum as an expert previously. Jess Wasco, William Weeks, Ashley Weeks, Ashley Theron, Dave Theron, Amy Jo Beecroft, Logan Nelson, and Denny Lynn Pulte. One of the other, sorry, excuse me. One of the things that was not brought up that is a major concern is the flood protection plan. There was nothing offered in regards to that, and we were heavily impacted by Hurricane Ian, with that area kind of being a runoff for us. So with the flood protection, I have doubts on the riverine, if there's a riverine flood plan. The Daughtry's Creek East Branch extends to nearly the Charlotte County line. A misuse or blockade, even choosing a wrong Manning's coefficient in the analysis, could have unforeseen impacts upstream. How confident are you that how confident are you as the applicant that your team of experts have chosen the appropriate Manning's coefficient? With the if there is a HEC analysis done, how old is the supporting data for that? Based on my knowledge and belief, FEMA's hydraulic floodplain, the riverine floodplain maps, are based on studies done by Taylor Engineering from 1999. Is the hydrology data represented in those models representative of...
Slow down, please.
Sorry. Is the hydrology data represented in those models representative of rainfall data for the last 25 years? Will the applicant state for the record that there will be no adverse impacts to adjacent properties by developments of this parcel? Another concern with flooding is the coastal flood hazards. I have doubts that the coastal flood hazards have been properly evaluated. I understand that the South Florida Water Management District and Lee County have taken the position that coastal surge scenarios are not regulatory for floodplain compensation scenarios. However, I have reviewed the FEMA flood insurance studies done for the Caloosahatchee River Basin, and they include cross-sectional data that appears to undulate relative to the ground surface. Presumably, Bayshore 31 RPD will comply with Florida Building Code and propose buildings 1 foot above the floodplain.
Could you slow down? Sometimes when we read, we tend to
Yes,
go
sorry.
faster
And
than when we speak, and she's trying to get all your words.
understood, yes.
Thanks.
I'm new to this, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Presumably, the Bayshore 31 RPD will comply with Florida Building Code and propose buildings 1 foot above the FEMA floodplain. Based on my and my neighbor's property's topography, this essentially creates a hydraulic wall between my property and the proposed development. If we visualize this for a moment, if a wind is blowing waves against a seawall and the seawall is removed, are the same waves crashing against the seawall? No, this proposed development is like a seawall right behind us in the Caloosahatchee, holding back waves into our backyards. Again, will the applicant state there will be no adverse impacts to the surrounding properties? Another concern is the compatibility for the current land use ag versus the proposed. My neighbors and I all mortgage or own half an acre parcels with single-family homes currently worth in the $400,000 range. The proposed development is offering significantly smaller homes and lots while contesting that there will be no adverse effect to our property values. Essentially, it's tiny homes next to estate lots. Again, with the flood issue of groundwater flow and the finished floor elevation difference, our elevation sits roughly at average 8.6 feet above sea level, and FEMA is, I think, 10 feet above sea level, so you'd have to go 1 foot above that, making it 11, so about a 3.5 foot difference. So with that, where the groundwater flow comes in, with the Doctors Creek East Branch, is there going to be no groundwater flow change due to the 5.5 or 5 plus or minus feet of fill? Will you state for the record there will be no adverse effects to the groundwater table by filling this property plus or minus 5 feet? Will I not have standing water in my yard that currently does not exist? And I'd like to submit for evidence a little diagram drawn that shows the difference in elevation. And just to quickly run through it, this essentially shows the existing versus the proposed elevation, where our finished floor elevation is at 8.6 above, and you have 15 feet, you have 11 feet for the finished floor elevation of the proposed development, with the water table down at sea level at 0. The natural ground is approximately 4 feet above. Our buffer to the planned development is approximately 50 feet, and the proposed buffer is 15 feet. And there's a stark difference in the elevation. So where all of our flooding from the hurricanes and other storms had historically gone into the floodplain, this will now create a buffer and everything may not possibly drain.
Thank you. This drawing is Eckert Exhibit 1.
Okay. So as part of the code with the lead compliance plan, are you saying with absolute certainty that there will be 0 adverse impacts to my historic level of service and quality of life? In your opinion, this will have 0 impact on the health, safety, and welfare on the adjacent property owners? That's all I have to say. Madam Hearing Examiner, I say this not as an expert in engineering, code, and traffic with the other experts that are present, but simply as an adjacent property owner that cares about mine, my family's, and my neighbors' health, safety, and welfare. Before making your decision, please consider the issues I have brought forth on the record today: riverine flooding, coastal flooding, the groundwater flow, and the compatibility, and the adverse impacts the issues may pose on mine, my family's, and neighbors. Thank you.
Sir. Next speaker, Rachel Moriale. Good morning, ma'am. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for hearing us, Madam Examiner. I am also located in the same location as Miles Eckert. He is my husband, so I don't think I need to point it out on the map. We do live right behind this proposed development, and I would like to echo his concerns that we did not have appropriate notification. The only reason that we even knew about this meeting was due to a neighbor happening to find out that this was occurring. So I would like to echo that there is not the appropriate representation in this room currently from the neighbors that live in this community. So I also, this is the first time we're getting to see the proposed developments, and I have even greater reservations given this proposed plan. to echo what my husband said regarding the water flow, this is a major concern for us. We had direct impacts from Hurricane Ian, and it was devastating for our entire community, as well as, of course, Lee County. But the water flow after that storm did directly go into that area that they're proposing to develop. We have pictures of just the debris piled along the roads through our entire community. It was really traumatic for all of us. Even in other storms, we were there for Hurricane Irma. Hurricane Irma, while we didn't have the direct flooding impacts quite so bad, it did raise the water up quite a bit so that the water reached within I believe actually 10 feet of our home. So with all of our significant storms, which we believe we'll be getting more and more of with the climate change that is occurring, we have great concerns that the water flow is really not correctly addressed with this plan. And with the residences planning to be directly abutting our property, having that greater rise in elevation will effectively, as my husband said, create a wall for us right there. The water flow that would have gone behind our property has no choice but to further stagnate in our properties and to pile into our neighborhood, as uneloquently as that is. I have also concerns about the environmental aspects. While there were no species of concern detected at the time, we do have in our nearby surrounding areas what very well known eagle's nest that is very close by. And we have seen the eagles active at that site. We're residents, we get to see these things. We have the opportunity to do that. So while the eagles were not directly seen there, we know that they have been active there. Additionally, while it is further away, we do know that there is the Florida bonneted bat that has a colony on the northern proximeter with Charlotte County. So this could have provided some sort of a habitat for them to fly and eat. I really, my biggest concerns are for that water flow though, and having such raised residences right behind our property, there's nowhere for that water to go. So I do believe that this creates an undue risk for the residences in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken Shoryak? I'm sorry if I butchered your name. Is there a Ken here? Heidi Shoryak, also not present. Is there any other member of the public that is present that did not fill out a public participation form that wishes to speak? I will close public input and we will back to staff and the applicant. Applicants, representatives, I believe we need perhaps a more detailed discussion on storage of stormwater and coastal high hazard compensation.
Okay. All right. Mr. Baracco, could you come up and I'll ask Mr. Baracco, for the record, Richard Aiken, I'll ask Mr. Baracco to come up and go through a more detailed discussion of the storage and how that will be done.
Madam Hearing Examiner, I can do that, but there was so much that I just heard. Can we have 5 or 10 minutes?
Yes, absolutely. Let's take 15 minutes. We'll resume at 10:10.
Thank you.
We are back on the record to talk about stormwater management and flood control.
Thank you. For the record, Carl Baracco. I'm going to try to hit this in 3 points. The project will be designed for a 25-year event, a rainfall event, and a 100-year rainfall event. The 25-year event is a dynamic event, which means that all the rainfall from a 25-year storm falling on this project will be directed to the lake and will be stored in the lake and released in a controlled manner into the east branch of the Daughtry Creek, consistent with pre-development conditions. So there should not be any adverse impacts off-site. The other storm is a 100-year storm event, and that's a static event, typically a static event, and it looks at compensating storage, and I'll get into that as my third comment. So in order to address the question, I could say, in my personal opinion, an increase in elevation on the subject site, if designed and permitted properly and approved by Lee County and the South Florida Water Management District, will have no adverse impacts consistent with the required design parameters. The last point is there has been a riverine floodplain impact analysis completed, which includes the project will not adversely impact flood risk associated with riverine flooding from the east branch of Daughtry Creek to adjacent residents or properties. And again, that is relative to compensating storage. So I think we've addressed the dynamic events and the static events.
So the last thing you discussed is if there's some kind of event that pushes water up into the area?
I'm not quite sure.
When you said riverine, I mean, were you talking about the Caloosahatchee River or?
No, the riverine is a rainfall event. I'm sorry, yes. But actually, the report considers both.
Okay. So the first thing I think I understood you to say, that if the site design, as it goes through the permitting process, complies with the Land Development Code and the South Florida Water Management District permit criteria, those regulations require you to demonstrate that there is not going to be an off-site impact by virtue of filling the site and constructing the stormwater management improvements for the site.
Correct, for their design parameters, yes.
Okay, and then with regard to the compensatory storage, and that comes into play because the proposed plan of development will impact wetlands that currently serve to hold floodwaters. You are required through the permitting process to show that your stormwater management system design can compensate for that loss of storage through the design of your dry and wet detention areas, correct?
Correct, and to say it another way, if there is any historic storage taken out of the basin, it's replaced in another area, so there's no net loss of storage.
All right, and the conditions that have been proposed for staff require the applicant to demonstrate that at the time of development order permitting.
Yes. And that condition is acceptable.
Okay, with regard to the height differential in finished grade, for lack of a better word, from the Daughtry Creek property to this property, it sounds, the testimony I heard from the public was they have concerns that this is going to act as some kind of dam and keep water that was flowing that way down in Daughtry's Creek. Is that, talk about that.
Well, maybe the best way to answer that is there is a sudway. Let me just look at my notes here. FEMA assigned a floodway to this area of Daughtry's Creek, the East Branch, and they did that so that there can be no impacts to that floodway. That's the primary reason FEMA designated areas as floodways, so that you can't encroach in that floodway and disturb the flows from a 100-year event.
Okay, so that impacts to a floodway is more likely to create the result they're concerned about than the difference in elevation between the sites.
Yes, in my opinion, because of the floodway, that FEMA's regulations establish that. that they won't take away from that conveyance.
All right. Anything further?
Madam Hearing Examiner, I was also going to have Mr. Stacekel come up. I believe there was a couple of questions about an eagle's nest or something of that nature, and let him address that.
Good morning, Madam. Barrett Stacekel, Bear Paws Environmental. To address the concerns that the couple had regarding bald eagles and whatnot, there is a management plan, bald eagle management plan set up through the county that requires any projects within 330 to 660 feet from an active nest comply to certain rules and regulations. There are no known active eagle's nests at this time within those areas. And if there were to come forward, if there were to be one down the road, we would address that. As I stated previously, we will have to update the species survey at the time of DO issuance anyways. So if there are any species that may appear or come up at that time, they will be addressed per the conditions of the state.
Do the regulations require any protection for instance, a perch tree? I mean, assuming what they're saying is they've seen perhaps an eagle, maybe not nest on that property, but perch.
For perch trees in the vicinity of an eagle's nest, they like those to try to be preserved. There are none in close proximity here that would require that. So that's basically
Thank you.
the best I have.
All right. Is there anything else applicant would like to put on the record?
Just one more comment, Madam Hearing Examiner. Again, Richard Aiken for the record. There were some questions raised about notice. I just wanted to state this matter was continued. Previously, it was continued on the record. And so notice was provided by the county, is required to be provided to any people who show up at that hearing and put they're given notice of that. So that was taken care of. So there is no notice issue as far as this hearing is concerned.
I'm hearing examiner. I have a copy of the affidavit for the notice for the original hearing, and we continued the hearing on the record.
On the record.
So we held the hearing and we continued on the record.
Okay, so let me just take a few minutes to explain the notice issue for you. The only notice that's required for jurisdiction is a publication notice 10 days before the hearing. And so what happened was the last case was continued at the last minute, but it had to happen on the record because the decision to continue it was after that hearing had been published in the newspaper, okay? So at that point, any member of the public that came were advised that it was continued, and they would have received notice of the new continuance date in that way. The county regulations provide for a courtesy notice that is mailed prior to the hearing, but it is not jurisdictional. And that courtesy notice would have only have been mailed before the original hearing, which was scheduled at the end of March, okay? And there are certain guidelines in the administrative code on how far they go out to send out that notice. We have testimony on the record that the applicant actually went beyond that to notify people within all of Daltrey's Creek. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, ma'am.
That would have happened before the first public hearing, okay? So at that point, it would have been the duty of the property owners in the area to inquire further if they did not attend that first hearing. That was legally noticed in the newspaper. So you could take comfort in knowing that the notice did in fact comply with the regulations. And in addition, you had 2 meetings before in the public. Explain your public information meetings. Why was there a second meeting?
So we had, Trump, could you put our presentation back up so I can get the dates correct? Oh, is it? You sure?
Yep, keep going forward. Keep going.
There we go. All right, so Madam Hearing Examiner, once again, Richard Aiken for the record. We had 2 meetings. We had a November 27th, 2023 informational meeting that was held at the North Fort Myers Recreation Center. We also had a secondary meeting that was before the North Fort Myers Planning Panel on February 6th of 2024, also held at the North Fort Myers Recreation Center. So what we did as part of the first meeting was we went beyond what would be the notice requirements of the administrative code and the Lee County Code. we actually provided notice of that first meeting to everyone in Daughtry's Creek, mailings to them. And we did that because we thought that they might have an interest in this project, and we wanted to provide them with information and showed a copy at that time of the master concept plan to show them what the development would look like, allow them to ask questions. At that meeting, we had all of our consultants present. We had our engineer there. We had our planner there. We also had, I was there, even though I'm just the attorney. We also had our transportation consultant, Mr. Treesh, there. They were all there in order to answer questions that may come up from the community about not only the traffic, which is a common thing we hear about. We had questions about some of the ecological things, which is why I asked Mr. Staskell a question about that during his testimony. And we had questions about the storage, the water storage issues that Mr. Baracco addressed here today. And so during that meeting, it became clear that several of those individuals attended that meeting, asked us to come to the North Fort Myers Planning Panel, and I believe that we had planned to do that anyway. But in light of that, we decided in both of those things, we had the second meeting in order to, once again, try to let as many people as possible know what was coming and allow them the opportunity to not only see the master concept plan, but to ask questions and provide input so that we could know what changes or conditions we might need to add in order to satisfy the public's concerns before we got here today, which I think is probably, I think that's probably a part of the reason why we don't have as much public participation here today, because we have already had these meetings and tried to interact with these individuals and listen to what their concerns were. So we did have those two meetings. We did go beyond what the code would require as far as not only notice for those meetings, but number of meetings that we had.
Thank you.
Madam Hearing Examiner, if I may add, when we continue a case on the record, we also put a notice online. All people they have to do is go to our website and enter the case number and we'll pop up.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is there an additional location to find out about cases is on the county website. And there's a public notice tab, is that what you're saying?
Well, you go to the website, it says search, you just enter case number.
Enter the case number, okay, for the case. All right. Is there any additional information staff or the applicant wish to put on the record? I don't believe I received a codified version of the conditions. I have that one extra set of conditions, supplemental conditions that were attached to the prior 48-hour, but I never received a codified. So I just want to confirm on the record that applicant is in accord with those conditions that staff proposed in their 48-hour memo prior to the March hearing.
That is correct.
So I should merge those two together for the recommendation to the board.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. I will not be leaving the record open. I believe I have all the information and documents that I need. I want to thank everyone for a detailed staff report, an applicant's narrative, and presentation. I felt well prepared for this hearing in advance.